Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inside the Tent. So, I'm here today with a good friend of mine and my former boss, actually, at one point in my career, whose name is Dave Thompson. He's retired from software now, but at one time, he was a long-standing corporate VP at Microsoft, where he led teams in Windows Server, Exchange, Office 365, and Identity. Dave was pretty well known throughout the company terms of a man who could get things done. So I'm really pleased to have him as my guest here on Inside the Tent. So, hello, Dave. It's good to see you again. It's been a little while. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and likewise, it's great to see you, Dave.
We were there in sort of those original days at Microsoft working on Windows NT, which I think it was just a kind of a legendary operating system within Microsoft to really change the equation in terms of like a world class, operating system that really was a robust, incredible operating system. And
Right.
so I'm just kind of curious if you could reflect back and just tell me a little bit about those original days, working on TU, guys like Dave Cutler and the other folks that created that. And, what was it like? What was great about it? What was maybe not so great? I mean, do you have fond memories?
Those I certainly have memories of those days. Those We ended up doing some of the earliest internet work for the company, right? The first web server, and obviously the TCP/IP stack was developed in the networking group. We developed distributed systems that led us into Active Directory, and so it was a very intense time. Cutler was an amazing leader. I don't know anyone else that would be able to bring something like that into being in the same way that he did, because he was deep in the code, uh, but and trusted us. I and three other folks reported to him to manage the teams. He was very demanding about the quality of work, because as you know, you're building this operating system, the bugs can get away from you. It
Mm,
can be out of control. And he would basically shut features down. He sat in the build lab himself and then made us take turns sitting in, deciding what check-ins we would accept for the daily build.
you were starting to look at hosted services and that type of thing, which was Office. Well, at the time it was Business Productivity Online Services was the name we came up with. Eventually turned into Office 365. But this kind of leads me, like, there's a lot we can talk about in terms of that history. Well, actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about how that got going from your perspective, because you
Sure.
were the guy kind of right at the start. You and Aaron, I guess, were probably the
Yeah.
first two.
It became very clear to me in running the Exchange group that the biggest problem with Exchange, which was, by the way, the league leader in crit sets, okay, the support, the highest priority escalated support calls, right? Exchange had more than any other product.
A dubious distinction there, Dave.
It's a dubious distinction, except that what I came to learn was it was really all about the customers being challenged with the complexity of running messaging service, right?
Mm.
In the face of the developing mobility and security and compliance, and spam filtering. I mean, it was just way too complicated for them to run messaging, which should have just been a service, a simple service for them to use, right? And
It's so funny you raise that, because actually the current service that I'm working on and run now,
yeah,
it was the same thing. It was like one customer we were in, they're like, couldn't you just run this for us so we
right.
don't have to? I'm like, of course we can. And then
One of the other things that attracted me is that to services is it was really going to be so healthy for us to have to run this stuff ourselves. Jeff Rakes had this thing where you had to send him your presentation. He had to have it, I think, at least by the night before. He read it. You didn't walk through it. He came in, sat down, said, ask you questions. So he comes in the next day when Aaron and I are in this meeting, and there's a bunch of VPs and people around the table. And Jeff looks at us and says, I have one question for you. Tell me why we shouldn't do this. And that was it. And Office BPOS was born, right, which was the precursor to Office 365. The thing about BPOS was when we put ourselves into the, into the service business. And, our offering was limited because the product wasn't really designed for that. But we did, we forced that basically forced all the different groups to adjust how they thought about their business. It was no longer a software business, that it changed how we marketed it, right? I mean, BPOS was a horrible name for a product, but it on the other hand, it basically, said, hey, there's a parallel to the server products, and it's a service, because it was just a parallel name to the existing productivity services, business productivity services. This was just the online version.
Mm-hmm.
Support people had to figure out how to take support calls, for services. Licensing, it changed licensing, and how we did commerce for services. Every group changed. We had to figure out how you administer this package of stuff. Bomber was 100% behind the conversion of services at that point. And so that support was critical. Facing the competitive threat of Google and their services for enterprise, that was a motivator for everybody. And I had the benefit of having been at the company for a long time, and built a lot of relationships and trust. The thing you allude to, it's super important to get things done in a team, or a team of VPs, or in any team, for people to have trust. And trust is about competence. Trust is about commitment. Your commitment to doing what you say, and trust is about integrity. You might remember, for example, as we were running BPOS, there was at one point the support team was worried about exceeding their costs. And I said, right now, what we're about building reputation. And it's not about making money yet. We're about reputation, and we got to focus on the customers having a great experience. It's important to be able to find satisfaction in the achievements and the growth of the people you lead. Because that's really, when you lead teams, that's your success, is what they can do. The way I used to think about it, actually, and if I was in a room, whether I was running the meeting or being in the meeting, you have to have your head in two places at once. One is, you're part of the meeting, okay? And then the way I used to think about it is, the second thing is sort of an out-of-body second perspective on what's going on in the meeting, right? And understanding why people are reacting, the way they are, what their interests are, what their feelings are at the time, right? I mean, those are, in fact, feelings are the most powerful thing in driving human behavior. I mean, the other thing, my father was big on integrity, and I always, let me see how I would put this. He had an expression, and I didn't really appreciate it till later, till I was, in the more senior in the corporate environment. But he talked about, running for office. He said, "I never ran for office." Okay, and what I would say is, I'm always just doing my job and expecting that, promotion and reward would follow accordingly if I did it well, opposed to, watching people, whose actions were primarily oriented at driving their career, as opposed to getting the job done and being rewarded for it. To me, it was always about getting the job done. And I really like the fancier word for volunteers, it's community engagement. I think the community is strengthened by people contributing to it. Their time, their money, but their personal time is the most valuable thing they have. And the other thing about this volunteer work is connected to me to a whole different set of people. That are fun to be with, people that have different backgrounds, people that share some of the same values. So that's been a lot of what I've done. Social venture partners, basically partners make a donation that gets pooled, that provides capacity to nonprofits that are trying to grow. The partners participate as volunteers helping those organizations. So it's a way of, engaging and growing philanthropists and volunteers in a community.
One passion follows another, and these opportunities just show up, and it's just sort of like it's a way of ongoing engagement too. That sounds good.
It is. I learn things. I have learned more about racial equity in the last 2 or 3 years because of the organizations I've been in and the opportunities to meet people that I've had.
I mean, for a lot of us, I think this past year has been a year where you can't look away. I mean, you have to pay attention, right? And it's great that you were seeing that before even, but it's sort of more thrust in the mainstream as a result. I think, in a way, coronavirus is maybe a blessing in disguise in terms of people's attention can't turn away to other things. I mean, they have to pay attention, and I think that's an important thing that's going on.
So I can think of one example where somebody gave me some advice that I've used, and I guess I observed its effect in myself. We talked, and at the end he said, "You got any questions for me?" And I said, "Well, yeah. Do you have any career advice?" He said the thing he remembered, which I've used, is change is good. Leaving Microsoft, when I had the luxury to be able to do that, that was about doing something different. It was about change, and involving myself in these different organizations is about change and meeting different people. I love working with other people, but there's definitely I benefit from it. I think anybody does. So
yeah, mutually beneficial. Well, I certainly benefited working with you. I really enjoyed our time professionally. So, and I'm never afraid to tell people that, yeah, Dave Thompson, one of the greatest managers I ever had. I will tell people that. It was some exciting times too. Worked on some big stuff together. So that was rewarding too in its own right. So.
It was, we were all so lucky to be part of all that at Microsoft. If I think of one thing about my Microsoft career, I was just incredibly lucky and fortunate to be there and to have that opportunity.
That was an interesting time. A lot of dynamism in the networking. I'm starting to realize, Dave, you're a little bit of an entrepreneur yourself. These have been entrepreneurial. These were sort of like, that's where a lot of the change and a lot of the growth was happening. Networking at that time,
Right. Sure.
Definitely with a host of services too.
Right. In the middle of the internet as it was happening. Right.
So that was pretty incredible to see too. I remember that.